as representative of the Association of Black Psychologists, and I am one of the current co-chairs of the Educational Institute for the Association of Black Psychologists. So we welcome y'all to our student reception. We have these about every year. And I'm going to give you a little bit of history about the Association of Black Psychologists, which we shorten to say ABPsi. And then I'll tell you just a little bit about the Indiana chapter, and then a little bit about some things that we have going on right now. Since I don't remember the history by heart, I'm going to read it. But traditionally in the association, we start out our meetings with giving recognition to our Creator, to God, and to our ancestors, which some people refer to as our angels. So, you can look at it as invoking the spirit of your angel or invoking the spirit of your ancestors. And that is to help us be on one accord and to help us through this journey of life. As I pour libation, and usually you have a life flag that you pour water into. I don't have it, but that's okay. I'm just going to put a drop of water on the carpet later. And then as I do something, as I say your thanks, then you always say Ashe, which is simply saying, you're in agreement. Okay, so thank you. We are now calling upon the spirit of our ancestor. We call upon God into this meeting, into this session, to bring it into fruition of what it needs to be. And we call on the spirits of our ancestors, or anyone who you feel has been instrumental in your life and helping you to promote you to become who you are and who you want to continue to carry you on their wings to become what you need to be. You can call out their names. First, I'm going to call out the name of God, my Creator, and to God I give thanks. And we all say, Ashe.
Ashe.
I give thanks also to my parents for bringing me into this world, and I think they did an excellent job of making me believe in myself. And so for them, I give thanks. Ashe.
Ashe.
Now, in unison, you all can just call out the names of anybody that you want to call out, and we'll just take 10 seconds to do that. So, I'm calling out the name of my grandparents, and you say whoever you want to say. So I'm calling out Katie Boyd, I'm calling out my friend Mary Wilson, who is now deceased, and so call out your names. And then, anybody?
Paul West. Florence West.
Let them hear you. Ashe.
Ashe.
And it's just that simple. We understand that this is not a journey that we do alone. One of the African proverbs is, I am because what?
We are.
I am because you are, because we are. We're not on this journey alone. We can't do this by ourselves. Another proverb says, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to gain and be successful, you got to go together. Okay, so we're in this together. The history of ABPsi began for that very reason. We didn't feel like we were all together, all on the same page in the field of psychology. So, Black psychologists did not feel that the needs of the Black community were being effectively addressed. And so they felt the need to establish an association that specifically focused on addressing the needs of Black people, of people of African descent, of the Black community. And again, I don't know the history by heart, so I'm going to read it to you all. The Association of Black Psychologists is the premier national and international resource for addressing the psychological needs of African people throughout the world. Our research publications, assessment techniques, therapeutic strategies, and training programs establish the association as the recognized authority for providing practical solutions to the day-to-day circumstances of our people. We collaborate with other professional associations in social work, law, medicine, and related social service disciplines to formulate or influence programs and policies that seek positive solutions to the challenges facing people of African ancestry. The mission of the Association of Black Psychologists is to aid in the liberation of people of African ancestry throughout the world. Based in the United States, the association is international in scope and currently has members and chapters in Africa, Europe, Canada, and the Caribbean. The association serves students, professionals, and citizens in applying innovative research to heal, empower, and optimize personal and social functioning. The Association of Black Psychologists was founded in San Francisco in 1968 by a number of Black psychologists from across the country. They united to actively address the serious problems facing Black psychologists and the larger Black community. Guided by the principle of self-determination, these psychologists set about building an institution through which they could address the long neglected needs of Black professionals. The goal was to have a positive impact upon the mental health of the national Black community by means of planning, programs, services, training, and advocacy. Every year we have a convention. This last convention at the end of July was in Orlando, Florida. And surprisingly, most people attended the convention as opposed to going to Disney World, so I was happy about that. Because when we had the one in Jamaica, the attendance was very low at the sessions. But I guess Disney World is for younger folks and not so much for adults. So we had a good attendance last year in Orlando. The conventions will have a lot of educational type programs. As a matter of fact, I get all of my continuing education credits at the convention. And I forget how many we need, but however many we need, I get them all when I go to that convention. There's a lot of professional development workshops that take place, a lot of networking that take place. You just run into people who are in all different types of positions. So whatever type of area that you're planning to go into, whatever type of job you are seeking, you are going to find somebody at that convention for you to network with and connect with and to help you steer in the direction that you want to go. So there are probably 70, 80 or more presentations that take place during the 4 or 5 day convention. And there's usually a pre-convention workshop that is like an all-day training type thing. We have a student circle, which is, some of you are probably part of a student circle, I don't know. We have several of them throughout the United States. As Midwest Regional Rep, I was responsible for overseeing 4 student circles throughout the Midwest area on different campuses. The student circle represents a supportive network of undergraduate and graduate students majoring in psychology or a related discipline. Founded in 1993, it was created in response to the need for student members within ABPsi to have a body to address their needs and to serve as a collective voice for the next generation of Black psychologists. Membership includes several hundred students located on college campuses nationwide. Members of the Student Circle have access to scholarship opportunities, leadership development, professional networks, student support, scholarly writing opportunities, the Psych Discourse, News Journal, and the Journal of Black Psychology. Students members also have access to specialized training at the ABPsi National Convention and other events. Many students publish their dissertation and other type of research in the Journal of Black Psychology. This is printed out and dispersed to members. I think we get 3 copies a year, throughout the year. And it's, again, it's research articles. And we also have kind of like a thick newspaper, which is called the Psych Discourse, which is just tells, many members will put in there things that are going on at their chapters. The president is usually have some type of address in there about something. Several people just put in different articles in the newsletter that they feel is would be pertinent to the membership. And those go out also quarterly. Now for the Indiana chapter, the Indiana Association of Black Psychologists was founded in 1976 as a chapter of the National Association of Black Psychologists. The ABPsi is active in promoting positive mental health, well-being, cultural responsibility, and social services delivery in the state of Indiana. We are dedicated to improving and addressing psychological and behavioral issues impacting our Black communities. ABPsi conducts workshops, conferences, and presentations, interviews for newspapers, local TV and radio, and conducts research relevant to African American people. ABPsi has advised the Indiana Black Legislators Caucus and Indiana General Assembly on issues relating to legislation in the areas of mental health, education, and psychology. Additionally, ABPsi has increased its focus on mentoring high school, undergraduate, and graduate students in the field of psychology. We do a free mental health workshop to the community almost every year. And this, I think this is my 3rd or 4th time as a president of the local chapter. And we have done training workshops, stress management type of training workshops at churches. We've done them at apartment complexes and just, you know, different locations. One year we were here in this building, I think that was about 2 years ago, and we did a workshop. This one was not free, it's for CEs, but it was on LGBTQ, and I get the letters mixed up, but y'all know what I'm talking about. It was that one, and we had one of our members who was then the secretary of the national chapter, lives in Detroit. She came down, she's an expert in that area, and she led that particular workshop. The free workshop last year was on trauma, violence, and healing, and that was at the Aetna Center, somewhere around here. It's in Indianapolis. This year, our free community workshop is going to be in Anderson, my hometown, and it's going to be phenomenal. If you all can get up there to this free community workshop, you need to come. We didn't use the word mental health because Black folks don't think that they should talk about mental health issues within themselves or within loved ones or anybody else. So my minister, my pastor, and I hope y'all have heard of him, Pastor Jeffrey A. Johnson, Sr., who is pastor of Eastern Star Church, and that church has 3 campuses. So if you don't have a church, you have 3 you can choose from, and I'm inviting all of y'all to come out to my church. We have a church in Fishers. We have one on right down off of 30th and Shaitland, between Shaitland and Emerson. And we have one on Cooper Road, far on the west side. So you have no excuse for saying, you know, that's too far to drive, because we have 3. There should be one that's close to you. The Fishers campus services start at 9 o'clock. That church has over 17,000 members, but there's always room for one more. So, yeah, feel free to come. But anyway, Pastor Johnson is going to be our opening keynote speaker. He is going to talk about mental health stigmas within the Black community and the need for Black people to seek help, professional help. And he's going to try to do it, well, not try, he will do it, I've heard him do it, from a biblical standpoint. What does the Bible say about seeking professional help? And some people need to hear that, to feel like, you know, just praying is just not enough for some people. You've got to do more. And going to a relative may not be enough, because, you know, the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, you know, and they tell physicians all the time, don't treat your family. You're too close to them emotionally. So we need to be ready to recognize symptoms of mental illness in family and friends and be comfortable with suggesting that they seek help. Pastor Johnson's going to help us do that from a spiritual viewpoint. Then a number of our psychologists are going to present on mental illness, emotional problems, depression, anxiety, and there's going to be 2 segments. One segment is going to talk to adults. Another segment will talk to the youth from ages 13 to 18. The youth will deal also with anxiety, depression, but they are also going to deal with bullying, cyber bullying, and suicide, and what to do if a friend is talking about, you know, suicide type issues and that type of thing. The adults are going to deal with the emotional aspects, as I said, but also about empowering them to be more effective in communicating with their children, and how to advocate for your child in the school system, you know, those type of things. Then at 11:30, Brother Nuri, who is the minister at Boss 74 here in Indianapolis, his mosque is called The Miracle on 38th Street. He is coming to speak primarily to our youth about empowerment, about the power within, about the greatness within, you know, to really inspire and motivate them. And I have seen him in action, and he is phenomenal. I saw him last year at the Black Male Conference here in Indianapolis, and he had those, it must have been about 75 or more young Black youth spellbound. You could hear a pin drop. They were so intent on listening to what he had to say. And it did a little bit of talking, but I convinced him to come. And we don't have any money much, and so we couldn't pay him, but he's coming out of the goodness of his heart, and so is Pastor Johnson. So you can't beat that, So the whole thing is free. Lunch is provided by the black nurses, and then in the afternoon we're going to teach people how to de-stress, how to relax, how to do deep breathing, how to do progressive relaxation. We're going to have a professional drummer there, the hand drums, who is going to teach about the healing powers of music and of drumming. And I'm looking for an African dancer because I got a feeling that the males, the young boys, are going to be interested in drumming, but I don't know about the young girls. So if anybody does African dancing, or if you know someone who does, we can use you at this workshop. But November 9, I'm going to post it somewhere. Take a picture with your phones throughout the day, and come. Please come. Carpool and come on up. And so that's that. I think. Any questions? Anything? Our conventions are usually the end of July, and it'll go from like that Wednesday through that Sunday.
To go into psychology, so we have a variety. So this is a chance to we'll start off with some basic questions, like to have them introduce themselves and what they're doing. And maybe by the time we get through that, my moderator will come back. So we'll get started. If you can just give us your name and tell us yourself.
Okay, what's up everybody? I'm Mark. I'm Nathaniel Skelton. My cup is like super cool right now seeing, is this mainly students or is this like professionals as well? Okay, because like when I graduated from here, like we got the student circle together, but it was like so small. But now it looks like it can be something super impactful, or there's a presence. So I'd like to maybe at the end of this or during this we can talk about maybe getting that fire back up and getting a presence on the campus.
So this is students from all over Indiana as well.
Okay,
so, and we do have information on the, also there's information on the student circle in one of our handouts, and we'll get to that.
Okay,
too.
cool.
So we'll talk about the student circle, which is an ABPsi student group. You can actually form the organizations on your campuses.
Right. So, and I guess I'm a therapist, and I primarily work in a lot of areas like addictions, but my main area is like trauma. So.
My name is Dr. Benetta Johnson. I'm a licensed counseling psychologist here in Indianapolis. I have a private practice on the west side in Speedway. I completed my degree from IU Bloomington. I hail from Kansas City, Missouri, and met someone who I wanted to spend the rest of my life with here, and so I consider myself to be an official Hoosier at this point of my life. Let's see, in terms of specialty, I work mostly with women. I do have some male clients, but majority of my time is spent what I kind of say trying to keep the doors of the church open in regards to the practice. So the practice we're almost close to 20 individuals working in the practice, either administratively or as a practicum student. So I do offer a practicum for anyone who already has a master's degree and you're looking to do some work in an urban setting with children, adolescents, and their caregivers.
Good, thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Dr. Joseph Smedley. I'm originally from Chicago, and got my doctorate in clinical psychology from Howard University. Currently, although I've been in clinical work for probably 15 years or so, I recently formed or reformed my own management consulting firm, and focusing on helping organizations and businesses with establishing a climate whereby individuals who may be struggling with some kind of disorder feel valued and feel comfortable about coming forward either to ABP or dealing with their issues. I talk about stigma. I think Dr. Dixon mentioned a discussion about stigma that's going to occur at the conference coming up. So what I've done is moved essentially from dealing with individuals one-on-one to working with companies and organizations. I've done work with still with school systems as well. I also serve as a consultant with 2 employee assistance organizations, one of which is kind of unique. It focuses primarily, almost entirely on what's called advanced practice providers. That's nurse practitioners, physicians, and physician assistants. One of the major issues in medicine now is burnout as far as physicians are concerned. About 46% or so of the medical doctors practicing are suffering from some sense of burnout, and that's a major issue. So that's one of the areas that I focus on.
Thank you.
My name is Aaliyah Rowe. I'm a 4th-year doctoral student at ABPsi in clinical psychology. I'm originally from Maryland, so living here is a lot different. My big umbrella is substance use and minority health, but I've been dabbling a lot more with race-based trauma, peer victimization, those sorts of things, particularly among African American or minority adults and children.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Simone Rose. I'm a licensed psychologist, originally from Chicago. I came down to Indiana and completed my PhD in counseling psychology at IU Bloomington, same place as Dr. Johnson. I actually used to be a student member of ABPsi, and I think kind of been in and out since 2012. I used to work in university counseling centers, but for the past couple of years I've been with the Indiana Department of Corrections. Really enjoying that area a lot. Ever-growing needs. We have an expanding seriously mentally ill population in the correctional setting, and then the substance use needs are also kind of blowing up. So those are major focus areas for us right now. I'm at the Indiana Women's Prison right now, but I worked at Cummings Correctional Facility, the juvenile facility. We have bachelor's level, master's level, and doctoral level position opens as well as training opportunities. So I'm happy to talk with anyone about any aspect of corrections, how to get into it, how to try it out. So.
Thank you very much. One thing I forgot to do is give you just an overview of the day. So we're going to have a panel discussion until about close to lunchtime. We'll have breakout sessions, so you'll have a chance to get closer to the topics that you might be most interested in. And then we'll have some more talk about trauma and things like that. So I'm going to give that overview. I wanted to begin by asking you about some of the things that you were surprised to learn when you first got into the field or became first interested, because you and I had a talk about that, about things like, I just never knew about this, like PsyD versus PhD, or I never knew about so forth. So things that might be based on misconceptions of psychology or the field or anything. You could just think about things like that.
So just let this organically flow.
Yeah.
I just think from my experience, and I don't know where you guys are at in your field of study, but like research what you want to get into before you like dive into it. Because for me, myself, like I said, there's a PhD doctor, there's an MD doctor, there's a PsyD doctor. You have to get licensed next, and that's its own other beast and thing you got to study for. So I think being aware of that kind of can help you make your decision on what you're going to do. Anybody want to speak to that? I think that's probably one of the major things I have learned that along the way. So I want you to know that before you even jump into the water.
May I also ask how many are undergraduates here?
Okay.
Any others are graduate students?
That's
Okay, so you all know all of these things already. Okay, good. I'm glad they invited students here. We'll make sure to get some attention to you as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to, just one quick comment on what you said. And that is the entry level to the profession is a PhD. That's what essentially you're referring to. We all need to, what you all need to really understand is that's the entry level to the profession, the PhD. So those people who are undergrad, that's is what I recommend. That would be focal point. And then from that point on comes the qualifying to get your license and so forth.
Or the PsyD.
And this idea as well, right? So we're talking mostly practitioners here. We also have different other, we have also social psychology, developmental psychology, we have industrial organizational, and we want to make sure you understand that there are something like within the American Psychological Association, there are over 50 divisions that give you an idea of just all the different interest areas and different types and so forth. We have also a handout about those different divisions, just to give you an idea, flavor of the different areas in psychology too.
And if I could add one last piece on that, like there's different pathways you can take. Like you can go bachelor to doctorate level, but for me, I did a master's, completed that, and now I'm applying to, because my grades weren't where they need to be, or I wasn't as prepared. That happens, right? So you got to keep that in mind, like sometimes you might have to take, so I can still see clients, but I can't do certain things that doctors can do. So that's something to kind of keep in mind as you're applying and making your career path out.
I also obtained a master's in between my bachelor's and doctorate, and one of the reasons was because of my GRE scores. And so I felt that I would be more marketable to go into a doctoral program if I had a master's degree, to be able to illustrate that I have the capacity to complete a doctoral level program. And so, like Mr. Skelton said, you can go from bachelor's to doctorate, or you can also have the bachelor's, master's, and doctorate if you're going to do something like clinical or counseling psych, as well as maybe educational, or if you want to go into research. One of the other reasons why I decided to obtain a master's was because sometimes different programs, once you get into the program, it might not fully feel like a fit, depending on as you grow and develop and you learn about yourself. And one of the things that I wanted to do with the master's was, if I didn't really like the program, I knew I only had to be there for 2 years. And I would leave with something under my belt that I could utilize. And so it was helpful for me, because that's what happened for me. I went to the program and I thought it was helpful for the time that I was there, but I didn't feel like it would have enriched me further to obtain a doctoral degree from that program. And so I was able to leave that master's program with a master's and then go on to doctorate. And if I wanted to, I could provide therapy, could get a license as a master's level provider, and not feel like that 2 years was a wash. Yes.
Yeah. So listen, when I was in undergrad, I really had no clue what was going on.
Right.
I went into undergrad, I didn't really know what I wanted to major in, so I majored in biology because I went to the same school my dad did, and that was his major. That's really what happened. After one semester with biology, I was thinking, no. All right, and I was going to major in psych, so instead I was going to minor in psych, so instead, next semester I changed it. My major was psych. I was like, what should I minor in? Sociology. These things are interesting. Still had no idea what I was going to do after that, okay? The role of actual mentors that I've had along the way has been critical in shaping the direction that I've gone in, because it wasn't until my senior year, I didn't really know what I wanted to do after undergrad. I took a counseling course, like an intro to counseling course my senior year, and that was the first time in all the 4 years of undergrad that I'd ever considered counseling as a possible profession. The whole rest of the time I thought, well, maybe I'll be a professor someday. That seems cool. No idea how to get there, just whimsical thinking. But I took that class. And then my sociology professor, it wasn't even a psychology professor. My sociology professor, he told me that I should go and I should get a doctorate in social work, which I didn't know that was a thing that existed. He's like, if you do that, you can teach, you can practice, you know. I'm like, okay, the idea of doing both of these things never really occurred to me. He said social work because that was his domain. He's a sociologist, right? A psychologist might have sat me down and said something different. What I ended up doing was going for a community counseling degree. And during that time, I met some additional mentors of color, no less. Because this is what I found, like, I went to a predominantly white university to begin with for undergrad. When I went for my master's degree in my counseling program, I was always like the N of one in each class, the one. So I would stand out, but I had professors of color who connected with me. And it was one of them that actually sat me down, and one, they gave me research opportunities while I was a master's student. So I thought research was something I felt like I could never touch. I didn't know, you know, how to even start that. They gave me those opportunities. One of them actually told me, I was telling her that I was considering doing a counseling education doctorate degree, because that's what I knew. Coming from School of Education and going from a counseling degree, that's what I thought. I never considered a PhD in counseling or clinical psychology. I didn't know that that was a pathway until she told me. I never heard of counseling psychology before in my life. I knew what clinical psychology was, but she told me she was a counseling psychologist. She explained what that was. And when I learned more about it and sort of the emphasis, I realized like that probably was a better fit for me. So that's the start of how I even went on this journey. Like, from when I was an undergrad, this was not in my picture at all. It's other people and their input, their guidance, me asking them questions and following up on suggestions that they made for me that helped me kind of figure it out. And it's okay to kind of figure it out. You want to have some idea that you know you want to do something, you want to go to the next step, but knowing that there are a lot of steps along the way, what those steps look like and what it's going to take, what you need to do to prepare for each step, like that's where you can get help from organizations like this, and you know, we do these panels. So I definitely hope, this time I'm going to try to stay. I'll say this, I'll try to stay because it's always the student panels that usually draw me back out. Because I really want to kind of, it's time at this point, it's time to be the mentor. You know, I've had a lot of the mentorship, so I'm excited to be here, really. I'm ready.
All right. Anyone else want to talk about that? Other things?
Yeah, I was going to say, one thing I was surprised about, I come from a very diverse place, so I'm from like a suburb of DC. Everyone's of color there, right? And so I was surprised on all my grad school interviews, even at American University in DC, I was the only black person there. And these are hundreds of people had applied. Faculty were not black. I mean, I went to a privately white school. I went to the University of Maryland, and so I was used to that, but I was just like, huh, that's interesting. And so having a mentor here, and I didn't come here because she was a black woman, but having a black woman that was my mentor, I've noticed now in my career that there's so much that I don't need to say, and there's so much support that I have that's kind of already there, especially living in a place that's not as diverse as what I'm used to. I feel comfortable talking with her about certain things, about feeling like an other in my cohort of everyone has blue eyes of all 7 of us except me. And so like things like that just feels like, oh, I just feel so disconnected. And I do race-based research. And so like, am I bringing this up because I'm the black person in the room, or I always felt this pressure to base my opinion or my thoughts or everything that I say on literature, so that they can't say it's just because you're black that you feel that way. And that's great, but it's also kind of stressful, right? Because I want to say things that are anecdotal, or want to say my experience or maybe my patient's experience, but I feel like if I say it that way, they're not going to listen. And so I have to base things on, and then I know things, so I know things based on the literature, so I can pull that out. But that pressure just kind of sucks sometimes. And so it is helpful to have my mentor that really gets it and helps me navigate how to do that. Also at ABPsi, I kind of got gerrymandered into this organization. There's a Southern Regional Educational Board that sponsors us to go to this conference every year for underrepresented minorities and PhD programs. And it's by and large mostly African American, and I guess because it's the Southern region, so it's African American and Hispanic individuals. What's so amazing to me, and I feel so empowered, is that when you've done your dissertation, so they have like this graduation every year, and everyone, the people that graduate, they get on the stage, give a 1-minute speech, and it's people, like even in 2017, the first one I went to, there are people who are at major universities like Duke in West Virginia, who are the first person of color, the first female person of color that have graduated with a PhD in physics, in bio, like, that's still happening. And so it's happening less and less, which is what they spoke to. Like, we're hearing the first much less, but there's still so much for us to go, like so much farther for us to go. And those people are gonna then mentor others who then feel like me, like I have someone who looks like me, who I can look up to, who understands what it's like to be me on this level. So if you can find that wherever you can, wherever you go, wherever you are, even in your profession as a clinician, I feel like that's gonna be, I think that there's so much value to that. I didn't think beforehand as an undergrad, I just didn't know that there was gonna be so much value in finding someone that looks like you, doing what you do.
That's important to understand, sure. And Dr. Smedley, of course, you have a clinical psychology degree from Howard University, and you had probably a circle of mentors, right?
Yes.
Of mentors of color, African American.
Yes, it's interesting that my experience at Howard is one that had a major impact on me as me professionally, and there's so much history there with regards to individuals of color who have made a contribution to the United States of America. One of the things that occurred, my master's and dissertation professor, late Dr. James Baton, was the first African American to receive a PhD from University of Pennsylvania. And I also got an opportunity to work at the Howard University Hospital and worked with a physician, did some work with a physician who he was a renal transplant surgeon. He was one of the only two at the time African-American renal transplant surgeons in the country. And I got the opportunity to work with him on some some research that he was looking at, having to do with the psychological impact of receiving an organ donated by someone else. There are issues around, a lot of people don't know, you get a heart transplant or liver transplant, what have you. People who are working directly with those individuals, some of them wonder about who was the person that this organ came from. Mm-hmm. And so I thought that was very interesting. So that's just a couple examples of the former chair of the psychology department, blanking on his name right there, who was there. Pardon?
Leslie?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. I went to Howard University as well.
Right. Those of you who can remember in your introduction to psychology, the theorist that did the study with the monkeys.
Is it the attachment? Secure attachment?
Attachment.
Okay, Ainsworth, right. Yeah.
Remember his name?
Mary Ainsworth and...
Okay.
What's
right.
that?
Harlow.
Was it Harlow? Good, you get a special prize.
Right, thank you.
Jason, you can come on up.
Well, Leslie Hicks, who was the former chairman of the Department of Psychology at Howard, was Harlow's grad student. So those are the kind of historical kinds of things that occur.
Did you want to add anything else, Dr. Johnson? Are you okay? Did you have?
Yeah, I can add something. Okay. I always keep talking.
All right.
But I have real quick. My experience at Howard was through internship, and that is something that was an unknown for me with going into this process. Is I didn't know that in order to be a clinical or counseling psychologist that I had to do an internship. It's basically a residency like how physicians do. And so I had the wonderful experience of being selected to go to Howard University, and it affirmed everything about me and blackness. And when I left there, I felt like I could do just about anything. Now, I can't do everything, but it was, I think it goes back to what's been shared on the panel in regards to connecting with someone who looks like you. Another thing that I did not know I was going to experience in graduate school and could be part of my structure, but I didn't know that I was going to have experiences where I felt like I was under attack. And I felt like these are people who I applied and they said they wanted me here. And then I had these experiences where it didn't feel like they really wanted me there. And so it was a bit of a struggle and painful. And so that was a newness for me, even though I went through predominantly white institutions from undergrad, master's. I guess I just didn't really know the benefit of connecting with individuals who look like me, like intentionally thinking about it. So I gravitated towards it and ended up finding myself there, but I don't know if I was always fully intentional about making sure I had a village. It is very important for your core, for your spirit, to be able to have a village that can support, that you can connect with if you have this experience of feeling alone, feeling like the only voice, like a representative for the whole world in regards to blackness, where you can openly talk to someone and share what's happening for self.
Good. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. So I'm going to pass it back off to you. Right. I guess maybe the question we didn't get to, your second question about.
Oh, I don't know the question you read off. But I should introduce myself as well. My name is J.C. Ford. I'm a student at IU Bloomington, undergrad. I'm majoring in financial management. And I had to step out for a bit. Sorry about that, but I'm back. I'm the moderator now. So.
Okay, good.
So you already answered the first question.
Oh, we went through introductions and we talked about the things that that were new for them to come upon, you know, and got into some of the mentoring and stuff. So I just wanted to go ahead.
All right. And the schedule's already been gone over as well. Everyone knows what's going to happen.
Yes, panel. Yeah, we did today.
So let's just ask the next question. So what are some critiques you all have, if any, about the education of psychology during your time in academia?
I mean, you know what? My experience is a little different. I went to Christian Theological Seminary. Not knocking them. I actually love the training that I got, but most of the trainers or the teachers were, didn't look like us. And but I feel like I learned enough to be dangerous and to know how to work in the room. And there's a lot of good theories and a lot of good practices that I learned and I picked up on that you could garner wherever you go. But I think the only thing that I've learned is most of the research isn't on, that we're learning really isn't on us or about us. And so I think that you with me on that? Like, I think most of the theories don't come from studies that's happened to black people. So I think maybe sometimes that's over. And part of that is because I don't think we're in the positions or we have enough people, because a statistic I read from the ABPsi was like 5.9% of the active psychologist workforce is 5.9%. That's like 1,500 clinicians, if we can round to that. And then when you look at, we have about 6.5 million diagnosable blacks from 2015. That's a big gap right there, right? So I think that's why we need to get more into positions of power, and then we can kind of determine more what's being shared. That's my thought.
I think that the foundation of how we, from a research perspective, how we research minorities is kind of flawed too. So that's a critique. This is a safe space, so I can say that there's a team of researchers who's doing work, and they're moving toward minorities and with pain, which I think is so valued. But I was approached by a student who said, I don't know how to recruit black people for my study. I was like, well, is it a blinded study, or are they not supposed to know that you're recruiting black people? Which I've done that too. And she's like, no, I just don't know how do I have advertisements for black people? I was like, probably just as simple as just saying black people on there. I feel like that would get attention. That's what I do for my study. Like, it was literally called the Black Identity Study. Just like, huh, I didn't even know. And so it's like as if people may want to start to study us, but may feel like, oh, I don't know how to do it nicely. I don't know how to, I don't want to offend people. But you're saying that we need help. This group of people needs help. So coming at a perspective of help, right? And I think there needs to be more attention put on why there's so much distrust in the black community against the medical community and against psychologists. Based on the history, I don't feel like we learn that stuff, and so people don't. I had to seek that out, or I had to learn that in African American Studies class. I didn't learn that in my psych classes necessarily. And so I feel like my critique of my education is that there is this understanding that we need to know more about different cultures and ethnicities and the effect of what being a minority has on your health. But our education doesn't do that for us. We got to seek it out ourselves. Which then it's a burden on other people, right?
And like one last piece, because I remember what you said, when you feel detached sometimes, someone said you feel like the student body where I was at was like Freud, you're talking about Oedipus and this child loves his parents. It's just like, what is this? Right? Like, you know what I'm saying? And then you just feel kind of like lost in the sauce, and then you're talking about object relations and all this stuff. It's just like the foundation definitely didn't come from us or our voice. So that's what I'm saying. That's what we're saying in that sense. How can you really relate it to us then? So I think just to kind of piggyback off what you're saying, that we probably need to get more in the research areas so that we can, have more of our voice in the room.
So, introduce myself. I was late. I'm sorry for my tardiness. I'm Dr. Randall Horton, and I agree with everything y'all saying. I went to Morehouse for undergrad, and I was so glad that I went there, because in most of the classes you take at Morehouse, they're constantly going to integrate your African American history, whether it's finance, math, psychology, whatever. So you come from a basis of kind of understanding your worldview in the society that you're in, and it's a little bit different worldview than what other people may perceive. But in terms of psychology, learning about African psychology and that diaspora of Africa and how they look at life compared to what you learn in Western society, there is some setups of dichotomies there. And, learning things about Naeem Akbar, Wade Nobles. When I went to graduate school at Indiana State University, none of my other students knew anything about those professors or African psychology. The professors there didn't know anything about it. So if they don't know it, they can't teach it to the students, and they can't give a fuller education of what psychology is about. I really felt like coming from Morehouse, and then the skills that I learned at Indiana State, I felt educated. And I think that's the difference in feeling trained. You get trained to think a certain way. You get educated, you start to think kind of outside the box. And my research is focused on human sexuality. When I talk about research. So I was looking at the effects of race on male sexual arousal. So I just marketed it as what it was. Put up signs across campus and went to the psychology classes, and I did my little statistics and said, power analysis, you need X amount of people to make sure your stats are reflective. So, I got my African American males that I needed in there just by being transparent. And some of them you tell them regardless of race, they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. Because my research really was into not only filling out questionnaires, but there was a lot of psychophysiological stuff, so blood pressure, penile tumescence, all that stuff was getting measured. So some people are just not comfortable with that regardless of race, and that's okay. But I was at a point where I said, this research has to be done because it's never been done before. So it was a novel thing, which is what you got to do as a dissertation, and people were open to it. And somebody else mentioned about the idea of, it's so few of us in the field, which it is, and that people are still the first of coming out of getting a doctorate. I was the first black male to get a doctorate in the history of Indiana State University, and that was in 2000. But organizations like this helped me. A lot of prayer helped me. My foundation, just from family and coming from Morehouse, helped me because I had a better sense of I can make this, these fools not gonna get to me, excuse the language, but that comes up. And it, you know, made it through it. And I think Dr. Johnson earlier was talking as I was coming in about getting a doctorate. And yeah, if you're gonna start the travels, go ahead and get it. Because statistically speaking, only 2% of all the psychologists out there, doctoral level, are African American. About 0.5 of that percent are African American males.
Oh, yes.
So even looking up here, I think just Dr. Smedley and I, you're not quite there yet. I know you are.
Yeah.
So 2 of us out of 1, 2, 3, there's a
I'm a psychologist.
4, so 50%. So every time I go to a seminar or something, I always look around. I'm typically the only black male there, psychologist, and maybe 1 or 2 other black females. But that status remains the same, so we have to do something different about that. And the only way to do that is to get your degree. If you're in a master's program, more power to you. Do what you need to do. But at least keep the seed there in the back of your mind that going on and getting the next step is going to help you just financially and just in terms of career options.
And even if you terminate your training as a master's, you may go back later on and get your doctorate. So just as Dr. Horton was saying, just keep that seed going. My first profession was nursing. I did not go into psychology until I was in my 30s. And I knew exactly what I wanted to do. And so I just picked a program that had a straight-through PhD. I did not want to stop. I was on that train. And so I got I had to go back and get a bachelor's at Ball State, and then I went on to University of South Carolina, went straight through. They did not offer a master's. It was a straight-through PhD. And so, whatever works for you. That's what you need to do. I don't want to underplay that idea of community. You've got to have your community around you. You got to have your set of friends. You got to have connections. You're going to feel alone if you don't have a group of people that you can lean on, that you can depend on. And it was just wonderful at the University of South Carolina. There just happened to be a couple of students there who were already connected with the Association of Black Psychologists. And we were able to call upon them when we had issues that we needed help with. And those students, the black students in that psychology program, University of South Carolina, was a tight unit. We banded together. And we pushed each other through. As a matter of fact, I was ready to leave after my first month, and they convinced me to stay because I was one of the people. I don't have to take this mess. I already know who I am. So yeah, but it wasn't just about me, because it was about Mama and them, who would have been very disappointed if I had walked out. But anyway, but community is real important. The president of APA is a black female. First time to have a black person as president of APA. And so she's also a member of the Association of Black Psychologists. And since she became president, the Indiana IPA, Indiana Psychological Association, has reached out to the Indiana Association of Black Psychologists as to partnership, and so there is this move now toward educating more white psychologists about connecting with black psychologists in order to understand how to better work with black people. So we're moving in that direction.
All I want to say on the education piece is if you have areas of interest, and seek out knowledge and experience outside of your classroom experience. Because what you're going to get in your coursework, whether it's bachelor's, master's, or doctoral level, that's just a snapshot of what's out there. I'm in corrections now. I didn't have a single class, no mention. Nobody ever talked to me about going into corrections. And that would have been nice because it's a very different world from what we're prepared for in graduate school. So just know that like if there is something you're interested in, you can still get experience and knowledge outside of what your prescribed coursework is. You should definitely pursue that.
And you have to be serious about it. There's a lot of times students might come to me, or I know they come to Dr. Thompson, and they might say, you know, I'm interested, but then you don't follow up, you're not knocking on that door. And every program, you're going to have a criticism about every program, from if you're an associate's program all the way to doctor. There's going to be something that they are not going to fully be able to nourish that interest. And so if you have a particular interest, keep knocking on that door. One of the first practicums that I had when I was in Bloomington was at IWP. And I knew that I wanted to work with women. They gave us a list of our practicum sites. And I looked at it and I said, this is not what I want to do. This is not what I want. So let me figure out if there will be somebody somewhere who's interested in having somebody provide some work for free. And most places, whether it's working, whether it's research, whether it's educating someone, most places love volunteers. If you want to provide something for free, they'll say, okay, but you need to be assured and firm with knowing what it is that you want. So you can also share with them, well, this is my interest, but I want to provide groups. I want to provide testing to women. And so I had this luxury of being able to be at IWP. Then after that, I said, well, I want to work with a black woman who has a private practice. Well, that wasn't on the practicum list either. So then what did I have to do? I had to find a black woman who owned a private practice. And so if it's something that you really want to do, go for it. And don't allow whatever systems or program requirements to stop you. There is always going to be something, some kind of barrier that is going to be in your way. And you might be feeling it right now. And I'm here to tell you that it won't be the last barrier. It will not. But it might be something within that barrier, within that challenge, that is going to fuel you and educate you for whatever is to come beyond that hurdle. So, yes. I'm going to stop talking. Okay.
I just want to amen the volunteer piece. I have done exactly that, and many times I have volunteered when I was in your shoes, undergraduate, graduate, in various organizations. And if they like you, they'll find the money.
Sure will.
They'll do whatever they can to keep you involved. And so that volunteer situation, in many cases, will turn into a paid something.
And with that, I mean, don't stone me for this, but know your worth too. Because that's one thing, like volunteering is good, and do that, and you have to do that because you can get some experience. But I think sometimes, and this is what I learned when I was in my practice, I'm like, imagine, can I do testing for $10, $15? You know what I'm saying, just to get my hours. But then, you know what I mean, you get paid. You need to know your worth. Like, now that I'm like kind of out in the field, to be a black person that can do therapy, all right, you have something to offer, and that's needed too. So what I'm not taking away from what anybody's saying here. You definitely need to volunteer, but also know that you need to know your worth too. Like, you are somebody of precious value out here, just as a human. But then on top of that, if you're a black person in this field, in this industry, you're like cream of the crop. That's what I've noticed from my like year or two out in the field, like recently graduating. So I just want to add on, not to take away from anything that they're saying.
I agree with that.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as a professional.
As a professional,
once you go into that realm as a professional, knowing the value that you have, I think socially we have to be aware of how our ancestors came here. And the impact that has on us generationally in regards to the value of what we have to offer to this country. And so we might, not fully knowing it, ingrained within us is this idea that my value is, it should be free.
Right.
And it should not, no one should have to pay for that. It should be accessible to whoever. But as you are getting your training, if you need to receive something in particular, if you're connected with a mentor, a supervisor who is feeding you, it takes a lot of energy for somebody. I train quite a few people. It takes a lot of energy for them to fully value your training. And so that is a gift that you may not receive in certain positions where you're paid. But as a professional, once you enter that realm and you're trying to figure out how much you need to charge, give us a call.
Yeah.
We'll let you know how to talk to people in regards to making sure that you receive an equitable wage and for what you're doing. Yes.
Say one more piggyback on what you all are saying, just in terms of when you're on campus looking for mentorship. It may not always come from the, your psychology department. When I was in grad school, a gentleman, he had graduated from Morehouse, but he was working in the political science department at Indiana State. So we bonded. He was a black male, so we bonded there, and he became a mentor. I met a lady that was in the education department. She became a mentor to me. I went over to the African American Cultural Center, met some people in administration over there. So I was developing relationships with people just outside of the department, because at some point if you're in you could be your master's program or your doctorate, and you're doing your thesis or dissertation, the people that are on your list, like advisors, don't always have to be psychologists. Your psychology, the research you're looking at, may be looking at how African Americans spend money and the behavioral science behind spending money. So you're pulling from finance or econ departments, so you're making those connections while you're in grad school, and those can be support systems, because that's more people that want to help you and make sure that you are progressing or matriculating through school. So.
You have anything else to add, or?
Any questions?
Yeah, any questions at all? No?
No questions. Okay.
I have two questions, but I'll start with one. Coming from a predominantly white institution in both my undergrad and master's, I would be interested to hear what are those rather contemporary theoretical readings or individuals that you feel are making the contributions that are closing the gaps of research and the black experience in mental health.
Maybe you asked that. Yeah, I think in terms of you're sort of acting more like academia, like in terms of like theories and researchers and stuff like that.
Right, just as far as literature or maybe individuals that you feel are someone you need to know as a graduate student. Because right now I'm a first year PhD student, and I think I really resonated with your point of you learn about the Freuds, about the things that maybe don't relate to being an African American or growing up, especially throughout development. So just from a foundation standpoint, as a graduate student, is there a certain readings or individuals that you feel that I should know in that are going to contribute to my development?
I got three, and I'm out the way. I remember you mentioned I had to research on my own. So Naeem Akbar, deadly, Psychological Change of Slavery, that's a real good book. I know he's controversial. What's his name, Umar? Dr. Umar Johnson? So it's good to know. He's like pop culture, but he's a doctor. And then, is it Dr. Joe DeGroot? Joy. Post-traumatic slave syndrome. I think those are some good things to kind of just keep under your lid and be aware of from my experience. I don't know. Those are top three for me. But
I wanted to respond to that too, because I teach at the university and have been part of academia. You can cite my work, of course. Thompson, Chalmer Thompson. I write quite a bit about issues of racial identity. But yeah, in terms of some of the classics, Frantz Fanon is also really good to read. He was probably one of the first writers to talk about black mental health or black health. And
can you say his name again?
Yeah, Fanon, Frantz Fanon. One of his famous books is The Wretched of the Earth, and it certainly is considered controversial. he's got a lot of writings, and he's really an important writer. Some of the people who are doing research about things like hypertension and related to racism are really making some excellent inroads. It might be best if I actually gave those to you, like a list, a reference list, and I'd be happy to do that for anybody who would like that, okay? Maybe of just sort of some of the really good works. And I can also query my colleagues as well, okay? And we'll put out something like that. Does that sound okay to my colleagues?
That's great.
Okay, all right.
I think the Association of Black Psychologists has a list of readings as well. If you go to ABPsi.org, you will find a lot of references in reference to literature of Black psychology scholars. Dr. Wade Nobles has a lot of books that he has written. But the Student Circle now has a book club, and they are also dealing with literature and books written by Black psychologists about Black people. So that's another, you may go to abpsi.org and
We have a handout.
all of that material.
We have a handout on the Student Circle, and it talks about the book club too,
Oh,
on that
okay.
table over there. Okay.
So,
And what I was just going to add, when I was in, if you join the national organization, Association of Black Psychologists, part of your membership, you start getting these journals of Black psychology. So this is the same thing that like APA does, where research is in it. So 80% of the research in here is going to be by people of color. And when I was in grad school, this directly helped me because I was able to find Dr. Baldwin down at FAMU had developed this African self-consciousness scale. And I used that in my research. I would not have found that without having this resource where I was going through there, looking at that, I said, dang, that's it, that's what I need right there. Because my professors didn't know. They were like, we don't even know where to go to tell you to find that type of information.
One other person is, I agree with the ABPsi, that's a good historical. One other person that comes to mind, and I actually went to high school with him and graduated, Dr. William Cross. Did a lot of work on Black identity development. And he was at University of Amherst for many years. So I think that would be one of the people you wanted to at the top of your, Dr. Parham.
Bobby Wright, the University of Chicago. Bobby Wright.
Yes, yeah. I knew Dr. Wright as well.
And the Association of Black Psychologists, we have the national convention, and you can present your work there. They do have paper presentations, poster presentations where you can share your work. And so you don't have to only go to APA or different types of other organizations to share your work. And every now and then they also have some regional conventions and conferences as well. And you can, share your work at those conventions. And then just like with Dr. Horton, what he had, you can submit an article. If you're working on an article that is focused on Black African American psychology, that can be a journal for you to submit your work to. And so thinking about that, if you are doing some research and you're looking for somewhere to share that work, talk to your advisor or your research mentor, whoever you're working with. That might be a journal you might want to submit your work to.
many times when we were in graduate school, our University of South Carolina provided funds for students to go to the convention of the Association of Black Psychologists. So, you may be able to get your airfare or part of it from your university. I don't know if they still do that, but it doesn't hurt to ask.
You said you had 2 questions.
Yeah, my second question was just related to maybe practicum or experiences that you found that you were developing as a psychologist that contributed, whether it be measurements that you use today or even just being in a particular setting that you found contributed the most to maybe forming who you are currently as a psychologist?
I think one of my big things is I have a big mouth and I know what I want. And so I came in saying this is what I want to do. And so we got to make this happen. One of the things I wanted to do substance, I wanted to do minorities. My first site was actually at the Juvenile Detention Center. And I didn't know how much that was going to change me. I was just doing assessment, so it wasn't therapeutic in nature, but it had to be. I'm sitting with this 14, 15-year-old kid who doesn't even quite realize the weight of what they're now, like the system that they're now in. And really helping them figure out, okay, so where are we going in terms of goals? What are some things you want to do in life? Where can you see yourself? Has anyone ever talked to you about this? The answer is typically no, right? And so learning in that setting that I was there not just to get hours, but I can make a difference in this kid. And then, once I left, once the assessment was done and it was sent to the probation, I don't know whatever happened to that person. I can go in faith and think, maybe I changed their life. Maybe things are different, but I don't know. And so that part is what's upsetting sometimes. But yeah, I knew what I want. I got in there. I did the work. We also, with my lab, we do DBT therapy for adolescents in high schools. And so it's manualized, but for the most part, I like to get to know them. Like, how can I help you in terms of impulsivity? We vent about teachers, about parents or whatever, but like bringing it back to the skills. We teach emotion regulation, mindfulness, distress tolerance, and interpersonal effectiveness, so how to get what you want with keeping your goals and your values in line, which help you talk to how you talk to your parents. You want to go to this party with your friends, but you also want to be respectful for them or whatever, or apologize to them for something that you've done. Kids don't hear that as often. So for me, my practicum areas have been molded around me and what I wanted to do, but also I wanted to get more breadth. So I was at a private practice placement last year with chronic pain. That was interesting, and then right now I'm at the VA. So my point of having a big mouth is people know what I want. They know what my interests are and what I can provide. I had 2 people reach out to me to work with them this year. Practicum supervisors that, I hear that you want this, or I hear that you are interested in that. Like, would you be willing to come over to me? If I'm full this semester, let's lock you in for next semester. So I am the only one that's in charge of my future, and so I take ownership in that. And so I feel like that's what I would encourage you guys to do. Don't let someone else. We had a list of practicum sites, and I was like, okay, but what else is there out there? And so be more intentional in figuring out what it is you want to do, and be open to things that you weren't maybe already interested in. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I like the term you said, breadth, that spoke to me. When you're in grad school, there's so many things coming at you, and initially you may say, man, I want to do this. And maybe that is what you end up doing. I started off initially, I thought I wanted to work with kids, and I started that and was doing pretty well. But then over time, I found out working with kids really meant doing family therapy. Because I would have some parents who were really into it and help with the homework and all that, and other parents literally would drop them off, come back at 5 o'clock, you're not fixed yet? So it was no, you're not fixed yet. So, but over time I was like, well, that's maybe not what I want to work with. So just setting yourself up to have a breadth of experience, drug and alcohol, inpatient unit, outpatient unit, DBT work, cognitive behavioral therapy, because all that is going to give you at least the foundation. And then over time, you will, kind of like a pyramid, you'll start to focus in and get more specific on truly your interests or passions. But outside of school, the main thing that really helped me was, again, just life experience. Some of my classmates, we just worked out this way, I think. I ended up working twice while I was in grad school, and I worked at an inpatient unit at Hamilton Center in Terre Haute. That experience helped me the most because although I'm reading about some of these things, I had no basis of comparison in my life, like what does delusional disorder really look like? But being on a psychiatric unit at Hamilton Center, I was like, oh, that's what it is when somebody's delusional. This one lady, she thought Bob Barker on Price is Right was selling her furniture. Oh, Lord. So every time the TV show, she'd be like, why is he selling my car? That's my car. And And it was kind of humorous, but kind of at the same time, like, I see what that looks like in life. Now, my classmates didn't have that experience, so that transferred when I started doing therapy, not necessarily with delusion disorders, but just life. I was able to pull from those resources because of working on that inpatient unit 1. They're trying to still kind of develop and catch up just book-wise. This is what it says, so really you should be doing this. But in real life, signs and symptoms don't always look like what they look like in the book. You know, it's kind of sanitized to kind of highlight what the disorder looks like. So just experience. If you have an opportunity to volunteer or even work a little bit on a psychiatric unit or something, the information you get from that will help you so much, just being a good clinician and understanding diagnoses.
I can say amen to that. Are you?
I just want to ask a question so I could just see. Are any of you interested in business, the business environment, by show of hands? One person. Yeah, I was going to say in terms of the breath piece, don't shy away from those kinds of opportunities. When I finished Howard, came back to Chicago, I worked in community mental health for a while. And somebody started talking about a position that they had applied for at United Airlines. And they didn't get the position, and it was required a master's degree, and I had my doctorate. And I applied just out of a whim, and I got the position. And it was a position in management. We were internal consultants to do administer a battery of personality tests to management around the system. And that was, I spent 3 years there, and that was an awesome experience. One of the things that I want to point out is that just like there are individuals of color in education and in healthcare and all of the other areas, there are also a lot of African Americans who are in companies and corporations who find themselves sometimes disadvantaged by some of the systems, performance evaluation systems, and interviewing systems, group interviewing systems that occur in corporate America. And so very few of us are in those corporations that could support the African American employees and management in corporate America. So I want if you have an opportunity to broaden your perspective into the business environment, we are very, very much needed there. So I just want to throw that out.
I think something that came to mind is like the interest that you have. So like there's lawyers, but there's one that deals with business and maybe one that deals with family. Like they got a specialty, and so I'm saying it's good to specialize and hone in on something that interests you, because what I'm learning, there's a whole gamut. To become a psychologist or a clinician, you can be one in a school, you can be in agency work, you can have private practice, you can do a little bit of all those. Like even right now, like I do home base and private practice. So I'm just saying you got tons of options. And I think the best thing to do is to get exposure. I think that's been the blessing of me doing my master's, because I'm like, I've done the child work. I'm like, problem kids, problem parents. I don't feel like doing all that whole dynamic, right? And then I worked in addiction, so I'm learning. And you kind of zero in on what you want to do. I'm working in homes, I'm working at schools, I'm working with people. So find out I'm working with youth, black kids, adults. Doesn't matter, like which one better works for me. And something that I'm like moving myself towards is making yourself more marketable. Get credentialed, get training in something that makes you stand out a little bit more. So for me, there's this CSAC, I don't know if you're familiar with that, and that means you're working with, I'm not going to get you lost all in the letters, but it's just like you're working with youth that have offended another youth sexually. So like for me, they're looking for that specific type of person to work with that population. Like sometimes it's court ordered. So I've kind of made myself, hey, I'm someone that you can use for this. Make yourself marketable. Another one is neuroscience is a big industry out there now, and I've got this training called EMDR, where it's called eye movement desensitization and reprocess. It's a $50 word, whatever. But at the end of the day, reason why I got trained in that is because I know like sometimes we don't like talking. We have a lot of trauma. This helps with that. You know what I'm saying? It's research based. The VA uses it. So I've kind of I'm making myself more marketable. I don't have any issues working with people or getting clientele because I know I can do a certain thing and I can do it good. So what I'm saying that humbly, I'm saying for you, make sure you know what you want to do and kind of set yourself apart in a way. I think that's it.
Hand back here.
I want to share one thing before we get to her question.
Okay.
So in going back with what Dr. Smedley said in regards to if you are interested in business, that IO aspect of psychology, when I was in school I had that interest, but I didn't really know how to get there. And so that's another reason again in regards to connecting with your village and sharing what your interest is. It would have been helpful for me if I would have told someone that. Maybe they would have said, well, call around to Chase Bank, call their human resources department and see if they have a access and inclusion officer. Or, check around with, you're interested in forensic. Okay, well, how about you call an attorney and see if you can talk with them about the work that they do. You don't always have to stay within psychology, just like what Dr. Horton was saying in regards to trying to meet your passion or your interest. You can branch out and try to connect with other people, and sometimes with being new, you don't really know how to get there, but there may be someone else who might be able to give you some ideas on how to connect or how to open that door to figure out what's a way for me to get into that area. There might be somebody here who might have a passion to get to a C-suite at some point, when you're going to be a COO, and you can say, well, I didn't start out in finance or operations. I started out as in psychology, but here I am. I'm the COO of, I don't know, Honeywell. Anything. The skill that you have, that you're learning in regards to becoming a psychologist is something that can be used almost anywhere. And so, there's a lot of clinicians up here, but psychology is something that can take you all around the world. And so allowing yourself, in regards to that practicum piece, just allowing yourself to be open to various opportunities. And you might be afraid, but just keep putting one foot in front of the other and walking in that fear, and you never know where it might take you.
Stay back here.
So it's not a question. I'm going back to the business comment that you were saying. There is a woman. Her name's Melody Hobson. I'm not sure if you all are familiar with her. But she is in economics and investment. She's I think the CEO of Ariel Investment. She's based out in Chicago, or at least that's where she started. I just wanted to drop that name just in case anyone wanted to kind of research someone that is kind of getting these conversations out in corporate America. And she talks about being, mainly her audience is white folks, but she's trying to get folks within corporate America and everything hey, don't be colorblind, be color, I forgot what she said. She did a TED Talk. Really great. Color brave, yeah. She was be color brave instead of colorblind. And it's it's odd that when we go to these Fortune 500 companies and in these meetings, there's typically, all white men. And then sometimes if it is diverse, it's mainly white women. And not saying that that's a bad thing, but it's okay, these are companies that they have this power, but the folks that are behind it, it's not diverse. It's not a true thing. So she is one of those women. She's a black woman, and she has a very interesting story. So if you do get a chance, listen to her story. But she's really trying to get these conversations out there within corporate America and getting folks to say, okay, black people can be in power and have this history and this knowledge and apply it in different ways.
So earlier we spoke on how black people don't really want to talk about mental health. So my question is, what does that look like in the psychology world for you guys? And with your clients and stuff, What does that look like? And what are they doing to get the word out and let everyone know that it's important?
I'm not actively seeing patients anymore, just by choice, but probably once a month my phone rings from somebody who says, are you taking on patients? And they're African American. So somebody has asked somebody who's asked somebody who said, well, I got a friend or somebody, he's a psychologist, contact him. So I think historically the fear of getting in some healthcare systems was there, and I think some of it is still there out of ignorance. But I'm also saying that's changing, and I think it's changing due to one, education, and then two, people's socioeconomic status. They're like, well, I got a little extra. I may want to go ahead and try the therapist route. I've been talking to Big Mom and Uncle Mike, but that's not getting it anymore. I want to talk to somebody else. So as an African American psychologist here in at least Indianapolis, there is a need. I mean, there's just not enough of us in town to hit the need of, from what I'm hearing and the information I'm getting from emails and phone, because I'm constantly sending people out. Shot Dr. Johnson a couple times, said, hey, are you seeing somebody, or can you pick up a client? So in my opinion, personal opinion, the need is there and people are wanting to utilize the service.
One area that I recommend that I just kind of, again, backed into is our churches. Our ministers everywhere in general, but our ministers in particular are overwhelmed because in pastoral counseling, if they have a course, if they've gone to seminary, and if they've had a course in pastoral counseling, it does not give them the skills that they need for some of the people who come to them for counseling.
True.
And so there's about several churches that I go to that are during Mental Health Month. There's one church on the east side. The pastors, the prior pastor had a daughter who had bipolar disorder. She had been misdiagnosed. This is years ago, and she'd been diagnosed as schizophrenic, which is something that's kind of classic over the years throughout history. We African Americans wind up with the worst diagnosis as opposed to mood disorders. So, but she was severely depressed, and she wound up taking her life. And the pastor that has certainly had an impact on him. And during Mental Health Month, he asked me to come in and talk to the congregation about the need for, in addition to prayer, the need to reach out to professionals for individuals who might be experiencing anxiety, depression. I also talked about what is anxiety, what is depression, what are various diagnoses. So educating the African American community through our churches, and pastors are hungry for individuals like us, even those of you who are students in graduate school, with the information that you know, they just really want to at least have some idea of what to say to people when they approach them for counseling.
From a practicum student perspective, again, last year I was at a chronic pain integrated care center, so I loved every second of it, but I noticed with most of my patients, but also with my Black patients, what comes out is the physical. So what it looks like is somatization, or just like this over preoccupation with the physical symptoms, when there is underlying mood stuff, that they don't want to go there, or they don't feel. And so for me, my approach, particularly with people with chronic pain, was that, I'm not saying it's all in your head, but I will say that if we change the way that we think about it, if we add more value to your life, if we latch ourselves onto the things you're able to do, you're going to feel better about living with this pain. But that's a hard barrier to break down. You know, I need to get this shot. I need these medications. I need the doctors to figure out what is wrong with me. But how are you feeling? Like, how's your mood? What is it like to have to still care for your family? What is it like to have to still work? So for me, it was just starting obviously with like basic empathy, like basic supportive therapy type stuff, to really have them break down this barrier, this belief, this ingrained belief that physical pain is more important or it's more prevalent than what's actually going on. Or so we tell people like that got really successful treatments. Spinal cord stimulators are so effective at treating chronic pain, but you still report that same level of pain or dissatisfaction. There's something else going on. And really having them sit down with their numbers and their data too, really being transparent with them, really showing them things like many people, there is error rates obviously, but what else is going on here, or what else can we talk about, or what else is going on in your life that's stressing you or distressing you. I have chronic migraines, so I tell people if I think about how much my head hurts, then it's going to keep hurting. If I kind of overcome that and just kind of get through whatever I need to get through that day, it doesn't necessarily take it away, but I'm not suffering in that migraine. So what it looked like to me from my experience was physical symptoms, and that is hard from my lens to kind of break down and tell people like, I know you don't feel that, or I know that their pain is there, but there may be something else. So I feel like that's an area that I can continue to grow in. I was afraid that my work here at the VA was going to be mostly white males, but it's not. It's getting much younger and much more minorities, which I'm actually happy about, right? Because that means that people are wanting to get the help. It's not that it's new. I just feel like I feel like people are talking about it more. I just want people to seek help more. But I think it's coming.
In that correctional setting, it's interesting. Their friends, hey, you should go see so-and-so. I mean, they literally do that. They have a little prison network referral system, and they're able to put in healthcare requests, and they'll write my name on it. And some of these people are already signed to other clinicians because I was the boss. I got to make some changes around that, but it just, for a lot of cases, especially for people that have just been through the criminal justice system in general, the level of mistrust that they have for the system and for those associated with the system is pretty high. But seeing me, they at least question if maybe I'm someone who's there to help them. Maybe I'm someone who's there who will relate to them on a different level, in a different way, and that opened up a lot of doors. When I was on the university campus, I used to do a lot of outreach, and so in more informal settings, and then they'd come. So, I mean, it's there, but I think that the fact that we just have, as what Randy was talking about earlier, just the numbers and our representation is part of the issue, and they see that, mental health does affect our community. It is something that it's okay to talk about. It doesn't mean that, that's what I tell all of them. Usually they come in, they'll say to me like, I'm struggling with this and this, but I'm not crazy. And I say, no, you're not crazy. And I even tell them, like, we have these mental health things, and I'm not even going to change your mental health code today. But let's talk about what's going on and how we can help to you. So, I don't know, it's just how they approach and what they see, and I don't know, having an open door and let them know that it's not what their perception of what talking to a therapist means or even being on medication means. You get to be that person that talks to them and kind of chip away at some of the myths. Yeah, the myths.
Anything any of us can do to reduce the stigma. That's getting back to your point. As I say, if you belong to a church, talk to your pastor about whether or not you might they have programs or some kinds of meetings, you get up and talk about mental health and the value of reaching out to a counselor. If in addition to prayer, let's get some of this.
I had to do this mental health fair at our congregation, and I just kind of started from the history and just breaking it down, like even mental health overall. You just know your history. Like it started off with like psychiatric wards. It's like, ugh, that's a turn off to black people and white people. and then learning, just giving us like moving from that. Then you're talking about Tuskegee experiments. You're talking about a whole bunch of stuff. You're talking about our culture where what happens in here stays in here. Don't go. And just helping everybody understand there's a reason why we're kind of like to therapy, and it makes sense. So validating that, and then even for me in my experience. So to your point, just talk about it. And breaking down some of the misconceptions, like for instance, antisocial, people think that means you're to yourself. Some of it's just psychoeducation. That's not what antisocial means. You're like setting stuff on fire. You're being antisocial. So helping people understand what you're talking about, being introverted, like just helping people understand what the textbook definition is of something versus what the pop culture is saying. And so for me, like, this has been my experience. Like at my school, I couldn't give anybody therapy until I went through my own. That was a requirement. So I had like 27 years of just stuff just bottled up. I finally got in the room and, oh man, it's the best thing that happened. Like to just get it out and talk and vent and just chop it up. Like sometimes it doesn't have to be so, how did it make you? It's not so serious at all times. Sometimes it's just being relational with the therapist and telling them where you're coming from and venting. So I just think helping people understand what it is and what it's not is going to be helpful, and just having those conversations. That's been my experience.
And I'm sorry, I was going to say, I learned that in my intro to counseling course. You are not going to be a good therapist unless you know what it's like to be on the other side. There's so much utility. I'm in therapy now, like, and it's not because I have a diagnosis. It's just because we got stuff. Yeah. So I can't tell someone to get help if I'm not.
Crazy.
Yeah,
drink the water, right. And you might have a diagnosis.
Yeah.
That's just fine. Because if you are, a lot of times we come to this field because we want to help. So oftentimes either we want to help ourselves or we want to help someone else who we love, and so we find a way to gravitate towards a population that's similar to an individual who reminds us of this person that we weren't able to save.
Right.
But to the idea of the stigma, I think you have to be creative. What I hear, in terms of themes here, accessibility, you have to be visible in terms of talking about this mental health piece. We're in a wonderful day and age of technology and blogs and podcasts and everyone, YouTube. There's somebody here that probably has a YouTube channel. If you do, let me know. I'd love to check it out. But you can talk about mental health through that. That's a way in order to do that. When I was doing mental health fairs, every now and then I'll still do them. You'll see people, if you have your sign up, psychology, mental health, they'll just keep walking by. I don't want anybody seeing me, talk to you, stand at this table. So you have to be creative. So I put up this sign that said spiritual health screenings. And I got so many people to come by the table. They're like, oh, what is this? What is spiritual health? A lot of people are more into astrology and doing things, even maybe tarot cards sometimes, than they are with actually coming to see a mental health professional. So sometimes you may have to kind of change the language a little bit just to get someone to gravitate towards you. In our school-based services, we don't call it behavioral health, we say student support services. Because if you're a parent, sometimes you don't want your child to see a therapist because that might mean that I have failed as a parent. There's something wrong with me. And so when I'm talking to the teachers, I share with them, put it on you. Say, I want to be helpful to your child, but I can't do it. I'm lost. So maybe this therapist can help me to better help your child because I know you want your child to be successful. Is that right? And so it's just really kind of changing the language and being creative, because just the word mental health can be the stigma.
Right.
Just that. So sometimes you just have to take that away. Not even use the word diagnosis, mental health, psychology, but come and talk to me. Right. Come and chat with me. And I'm sure, just with thinking about Dr. Easter Rose down there, that's what the population that she's working with, that's what they're saying. Oh yeah, she's good to talk to. They're not saying, she's gonna get in your head and, so finding a way to build that trust, and some of that comes with just taking away the language of psychology and mental health, because that can sometimes block the door.
Let's everyone a hand on the panel.
Yeah, lunch and drawings, you know,